In this video, I'm going to go over some quick tips that will help you improve the overall quality of your Notan and may also help you make adjustments if you run into some issues that may come up, such as something gets glued down in the wrong area or something accidentally gets completely destroyed, how we can troubleshoot those problems. So let's start off with some very basic things. We finished our Notan and now it's time to clean it up, right? It's a little sloppy looking right now. I can still see my guidelines. So of course, we're gonna go back in with our eraser very gently. And I do encourage you to do this as gently as possible and just begin gently pulling off any of those pencil marks that may still be showing on your artwork. Okay, so that's the first thing you're gonna do. Okay, so once you've gone through gently with the eraser, you can wipe this off or blow it off. You can use a hairdryer to blow off the shavings, but whatever you do, you're going to be very, very gentle. So right now, I'm just going to use my hand, but with very, very delicate designs, I do use a hairdryer to blow the eraser off. Okay. So I've gotten most of the pencil off, but you'll notice that there's some little spots on my paper that don't look so great. That's actually glue. So my solution for that is grab a Q-tip or something very soft, a cotton ball I suppose would work. I prefer a Q-tip. And what you're gonna do is you're just gonna get it damp. You're not gonna get it soaking wet. So Elmer's glue sticks are water soluble, meaning they will break down in water. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go in and start just gently getting those wet, and I'm gonna let that sit for a little bit. And what I'm gonna do is very gently begin to rub and take off some of that glue. You can see how it's starting to lift up. You could even use tweezers if you want to pull some of that glue off of there. Okay, so you can see I just pulled off a big chunk of glue. And I can continue to clean that area up by gently going over top of it with a clean Q-tip. Okay, so that area looks a lot better. Let's see how this is doing up here. So I still am seeing some glue. Okay, now we'll let that area dry, and once it's dry, it should look much better. So I can go through the entire Notan and go ahead and clean up any areas where I'm seeing I have extra glue left behind. I would recommend that you work very gently and very carefully. This is paper, it will tear. The black paper, the pigment or color from it will rub off on the Q-tip. So you're probably gonna wanna use more than one Q-tip when you're doing this so that you're not using an area that has that pigment on it and trying to clean off an area that's white. So I'm switching between the wet end of the Q-tip and the dry end. Okay, so you can go through and clean up any of the areas where you got a little too much glue using that technique. So let's talk about what happens if you glue something down in the wrong spot. So I've got some issues happening here, right? And they probably need to be corrected. I'm gonna be thoughtful about that though, because I know from experience that the thinner the paper it is, the harder it's going to be to remove it carefully without it ripping and be able to redo it. So what you can do if you have something that's in the wrong spot is you've got a couple of choices. You can use something pretty sharp and see if it'll lift up at all. And if it's not lifting up at all, then you've got a choice about how to proceed. You can either leave it where it is, or you can take a hair dryer and very carefully with the hair dryer, you can apply heat just to this area. Now, you're not going to put the hair dryer on top of the paper. We don't want to start any fires, but you're going to heat this up. And then what that heat does is it will loosen the glue up so that you can eventually lift this off. So I'm going to go ahead and do that off screen. I don't have the ability to show it to you right now on screen. But I'll show you what it would look like, and then I will actually go do it. Okay, so I would just take my hair dryer, and I'm not holding it on top. I'm not pressing it down like that. I am holding it to the side, and I'm gonna blow it with high heat just for a minute or two, and then I'll come back and I'll see if I can loosen it. Okay, so I just spent a couple of seconds using my blow dryer on high heat to see if I can loosen this. This is stuck down pretty tightly, so I'll probably make the decision to leave it. But you can see that sometimes what it will do is it'll really lift up an area. So you can see some of those areas that started to lift up from putting that heat on there. So depending on how thick you put the glue on and how big or small the piece is, the technique may work. But again, you have to use your best judgment to decide, is it worth trying to remove that piece and relocate it? So those are some things that you can think about. Please make sure if you're using an X-Acto knife, you get permission, okay? The next thing we should talk about is if a piece gets destroyed, what you want to do is use a scrap piece of black paper and to the best of your ability, cut a new piece to replace it, okay? So let's say I attempted to lift this off, it got destroyed in the process. I'm gonna use my best drawing skills to recreate the piece and place it down. All right, now if you end up doing a more complex design for this assignment, then you are going to want to potentially use an X-Acto knife, especially if your design incorporates something in the middle, like that baby arrow we talked about, how if you don't have an entry point, you're not going to be able to cut it out with scissors. So if you recall, I had this little baby arrow that I sketched in here, and I told you there's no way for me to get to that with scissors. However, if you had an X-Acto knife when you were planning something out, okay, so let's say I have this arrow here on the inside of my paper and I can't get to it with my scissors. If you have an X-Acto knife at home and you have permission to use it, you can use the X-Acto knife to cut out objects like that. I recommend using scissors as much as possible for this and saving the X-Acto knife for anything that might be small. So you'll notice that for this, I took a piece of cardboard. This is just a cardboard box I found at home. And I'm also taking a magazine and I'm putting it underneath the piece of cardboard. That's to protect the surface and make sure that wherever I'm working, I'm not going to accidentally cut into the kitchen counter or my desk or wherever I'm working, the floor, because mom and dad are not going to be happy if they find your design etched into a table. So if you get permission to use an X-Acto knife, make sure that you also have a thick piece of cardboard and a magazine under the cardboard to protect whatever surface you're working on. Okay, and I would always advise you to cut away from yourself when you are using the X-Acto knife. Okay, so once you have the X-Acto knife, you would be able to lift that piece out and save it to figure out where you're going to glue it on to the other piece. Okay, so those are a few tips for you to consider and to think about as you work on your Notan, and hopefully those will help you. If you encounter a problem, don't despair, don't throw your work out. If we can't fix it, if you can't fix it, maybe we can fix it together. Come to class prepared to show me what went wrong, and we'll talk about some options you may or may not have for fixing your issue that's happening in your work.